This video I'm going to be showing us how to actually create our final assembly. So what you'll want to go ahead and do is start by clicking insert new tab and then clicking create assembly. What we're going to do is we're going to rename this one to final assembly. Now keep in mind we are going to end up making some changes to this later on too. What we're going to go ahead and do though is bring in all of our pieces here. And so we've got the bottom plate, we've got the back plate, we've got the follower. We're going to actually need 3 of these, so 1, 2, 3, perfect. Then we also have the follower tip. I'm going to actually not use that one. We need the pointed tip here. There we go, pointed follower tip. And then also we're going to bring in 2 of the side plates. And so for now, actually, yeah, let's bring in the guides too. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because one's for the axle, 3 are for the top. What we're going to go ahead and do is first is we're going to find our bottom plate, and so as you can see here it's named bottom plate. We're going to go ahead and right click that. We're going to fix that. Okay, now this is the back plate over here, this is the side plate. I'm going to go ahead and kind of set these up correctly, and then I'm going to move these follower rods over here as well as this axle. So what we want to imagine is that we're putting this actually together, and so the side plates end up resting on top of the bottom plate, and so what we're going to do is we're going to put these 2 points together. We're going to fasten those, green check mark. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on next to the other side plate. I'm going to make sure that I'm on that plane there, and then right here it's going to be this. Oops, we actually just selected the wrong one, so I'm going to deselect that. Let's deselect both of these. So we're going to go ahead and go here. I'm going to use the shift trick, click on that point there. Then I'm going to zoom in, hold down shift, click right there on that guy. Now we got that. And so these side plates end up basically getting sandwiched actually between the top plate and bottom plate. And then our back plate is going to actually go in here. Now in terms of that back plate, let's talk about the dimensions of that too, just so that you guys have that. It does need to end up being able to fit in here, right? And so if I actually go to this back plate, we can actually go into the sketch, and so what we've got here is where this is a 4.5 by 4 inches is what you should end up getting, and that's just the rectangle extruded by 0.25, right? So it's as easy as that. So let's go ahead and let's get back to our final assembly file here. There we go, perfect. So now what I've also got to end up doing is I've got to bring in my crank arm as well as the top plate. So let's go ahead and go insert, and then let's go ahead and bring in that top plate that has the configuration variables being used. And so we got top plate right here. We're going to bring that in. And then next we need our crank arm. So this is crank arm right here. That should actually be named crank arm for that part studio. But what we're going to do finally is we're going to end up fastening this. Now this plate is going to end up being fastened. That corner is going to be in contact with this corner right up here. And so now as you can see, it kind of looks a little crazy, right? What we could do is flip the direction though. You might have to kind of mess around with this a little bit too, but we're right there. And so that's good. Now, as you can see, the color is different amongst these, and so I probably would want to go back in just to make this look a little bit better and actually change these colors too so that they're all like the same color. But for right now, we're going to end up calling it good. Now let's go ahead and let's get moving on to the next parts. For up here, we're going to use the Fascinate for these guides, and so what I can end up doing here is I can zoom in on this, and I'm going to actually click and drag this guide so it's out here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over this face, and I want to have that center point there, so I'm going to click there. Now as you can see, that ends up going in there correctly. Up next, we want to end up clicking, oops, let's Control Z that actually. Oh yeah, I need to press the green check mark first. Now I can go ahead and fasten the next one. So it's that point as well as the center point here. So then now as you can see, that one's good, green check mark. We're gonna then next click this point. Then we're gonna also end up clicking right there. So you can see now that is good. And then we're gonna green check mark that. Now the next thing that we're going to end up doing is we're gonna go ahead and create our little axle. So we're going to create the subassembly here of the axle now. On one side of the axle is going to be the crank arm, on the other side is going to be the guide, right? And so now what we can end up doing is we can use the fasten mate. And so I'm going to pop in here into the crank arm in this very far part. We can hold shift down too if we need to click that center, and then that's going to be in contact with the center point here of this axle. Now as you can see, obviously the direction there needs to be flipped, and now we got the green check mark, so now it's good, right? So now what we're going to do next is we're going to actually end up getting this crank arm to be able to revolve around in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the revolute mate. And so now what we can do is we can click on that point right there. And then what I can also do is I can go in here and I can hold down shift and I can click right there at that point. Now as you can see, if we go to the left view, that does have our crank arm lined up perfectly. So if I press solve, you can see now that the axle is going to go in there, right? And I can press a green check mark. Now, what we want to do next is we want to actually set this up so that instead of revolute, we want to fasten. And what do we want to fasten? We want to fasten onto this axle our guide. And so if I go in here, we can go here, green check mark. But before that, we do need to flip this direction. Now, as you can also see, there is a little bit of offset that's going to need to happen here. So if I go in here, we can offset to the Z axis. We're going to go, let's try 0.2 inches. And so let's go a little bit less there just so that it's not too close. 1.75, perfect. Now what we can do is we can press the green check mark. Now what we want to do at this point, it's pretty significant, right? We want to ensure that this axle is able to move. And so it should be the case where this is able to rotate. So it should end up looking something like that there, all right? The next part is we want to end up setting these guys up so that they can slide up and down in here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to end up establishing these slider mates. And so we can go right here first. I'm going to hold down shift, click the center of that. Then what we can do is go into here, click right there, perfect, green check mark. Up next, we can go into here, hold down shift, click right here, green check mark. After we click this, perfect, green check mark. And then what we can also do is we can go into right here, hold down shift, click right there, and then we can zoom in on this, select that point there. And so now we can green check mark that as well. Now, one of the other things that you can definitely feel free to do, I haven't done this yet, but you can end up setting up limits for that. I would wait though to actually do that part of this because it's going to be pretty helpful. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring these follower rods down a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually attach the actual follower tips to it. Now in the actual Automata, we're going to have the rollers. However, whenever we model this out, it does work out the best if you have this point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here and I'm going to fasten this, and then we're going to fasten this guy right here too. We're going to go ahead and press green check mark there. We're going to click right here, and then we're going to zoom in the center up there, press green check mark. We're going to zoom in right here, and then we're going to zoom in on here. And then so now you can see that we've got all of our follower tips on there. As I've stated before, we are going to have the rollers for the in real life version, but for the CAD assembly, it does work out better with these pointed follower tips. Okay, and so now we've got it where this is moving. However, we do need to end up setting up our cams on here. So now what I can do is I can click insert. And then what we want to do is we want to find our cams that we're going to use. Now I'm going to bring in the hex cam. And then I'll also bring in a heart cam, and then I think I'm going to also bring in a pair cam. That's what I'm going to do. Now, one of the things you got to be very, very careful with here is the hex cam. If I right click this and I change the configuration, what you're going to see is I actually have a fillet on there. So what I end up doing is I have a 1/4 of an inch fillet on these. Okay, so please make sure that you do have this filleted out. If you do not have this filleted and you just have it where it is a straight edge, it is going to end up giving you some issues. So now what we can do is we can actually fasten these to the axle. So I'm going to click on that center point right here, and what we can do is if we zoom in here, we can end up going to this point right here, and then I can place this cam. Now what we want to do is we want to end up placing this over a certain distance, right? So it lines up with these. Now what it just so happens to be the case is 1 inch from this edge here is where this first one is, right? Unless you ended up changing that. So if I do the offset, what I can end up doing, so I can offset this by the z-axis, as I see z-axis is right here. And if I go 1 point, now we do have the distance of the actual cam as well as this we need to overcome as well. So it's just the distance, the thickness of this cam. So I'm gonna say 1.25, let's test that out. We gotta put in a negative 1.25. Okay, so now let's try this out. Let's go -1, negative 1.1. Perfect, and that looks pretty solid there. So what we're going to do for all of these is we're going to take into consideration 1/10 of an inch for the offset. And so now if we go into the fasten mate here, We can click right here. We can go to the center of the heart cam. Maybe I want the heart cam in the center there. What we can do now is we can offset, and then in the z-axis I'm going to go negative 2.6. Let's try that again, 2.6, positive 2.6. So in that case, they want a positive. So we can see that lines up pretty well. We can do green check mark. And then finally, we're going to put in the pair cam here. So I'm going to go fasten mate. I'm going to hold down shift, and then I'm going to very carefully select the center of this. Then what I can also do is go into here, select the center of this guy. And so now what I want to do again is I want to offset this. So I can go on the z-axis, and I'm going to put in 4.1 because this was negative 4.1. So you kind of got to play around with those sign conventions here. But then now, as you can see, that's going to be lined up. Now, some of y'all, if these are set up at different spaces, you might end up having it be the case where you need to end up changing this distance in there, right? And just kind of do trial and error to find out where it is. But as you can see now, we can end up rotating this with the crank arm here. And as you can see, these cams are following the actual crank arm itself. Now, it is lagging out a little bit at the beginning. It'll take a little bit of time to actually load this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually set up these follower tips. This is going to be the last step. We're going to set up these follower tips so that they'll stay in contact with the cams to create that lifelike movement. And what we're going to end up using is what is called the tangent mate. Now, if I go in here, the tangent mate, we select this edge, and then we can end up selecting the face that we want it to be in contact with. And what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that that point is always going to be tangent to this face here. So I can press the green check mark. What we can also do next is we can go to the tangent mate again. I can click on here. We can go to this face, green check mark. Then we can go to tangent mate again, click on this edge, and click on this face, green check mark. And so now what we can end up doing is we can go to our revolute for that axle. If I right click this, I can animate this. What I like to do is do the loop, and then we can end up setting this up so that usually like 100 is pretty solid. We can press play, and then now as you can see, we have the actual animation of our design. So after you have this completed, you can end up adding in the backdrops on here, the foreground. You can add in your characters as well. But this is the basics of how we can end up creating our automata in Onshape and be able to model out the motion with these cams. Thank you all so much for watching. Any questions, comments, concern, drop in the comments. As always, like and subscribe. Catch y'all later. Bye-bye.